It all started on a regular Monday morning, the kind where the sun isn't quite sure if it wants to shine or hide, and everything just feels off. You know those mornings, right? You're rushing through your routine, hoping nothing goes wrong, and yet the tension is in the air like a storm that hasn't yet broken. Inside a small-town high school, one of those that still starts the day with the Pledge of Allegiance, a classroom full of teens stood silently, their right hands over their hearts, voices blending in with habit. Everyone except one boy. One student sat silently at his desk, back straight, eyes calm, unmoved. He didn't fidget. He didn't slouch. He just sat there, refusing to stand. His name? Jason Miller. 15 years old, quiet as a shadow, with eyes that looked older than his age. He didn't seem like the rebellious type, not the kind who'd make a scene just for attention. But when his teacher called him out, in front of the entire class, what he did next sent a chill through everyone in the room, and before the day was over, people across the entire school were whispering about him. Now, before you jump to conclusions, this isn't what you think. This isn't some video about a disrespectful kid or a teacher losing control. No, it's deeper than that. Way deeper. And by the time you reach the end of the story, you're going to understand why this moment changed not just a classroom, but an entire community. So, if you clicked on this video looking for answers, why did the boy refuse to stand? You're going to get that answer. But you need to see how the truth unfolds, because that's where the real message lives. Right now, you and we're taking a walk together through a moment that reveals something we've all forgotten in today's world. The true cost of sacrifice, the meaning behind our daily routines, and how one quiet kid reminded an entire town of what patriotism really looks like. So, let's get real for a second. I'm not here to throw opinions at you, and I'm definitely not here to point fingers. This isn't a gotcha story or some clickbait trick to spark outrage. I'm here to tell you a story that matters, that hits deep, because it's not just about the flag or the pledge or the silence. It's about what's behind the silence. I want you to picture this kid, Jason. He's got that kind of presence that makes people underestimate him. Too quiet, too polite, too invisible. But sometimes the quiet ones carry the heaviest truths. And when his teacher demanded he stand and explain himself, Jason didn't argue. He didn't shout. He didn't fight. What he did instead froze the entire room. And when you hear what he said, and more importantly, what he showed, you're going to understand exactly why this story has captured the attention of millions online. Let's talk about something we all feel but rarely speak out loud. We're living in a time where every little action gets judged. Social media makes it easy to label people within seconds. Refuse to do something, and you're branded. Stand out, and you're targeted. But sometimes, the ones who break the pattern do it not because they want attention, but because their story demands it. And Jason? He wasn't making a statement for TikTok. He wasn't starting a protest. What he was doing was honoring someone who paid the ultimate price. And the moment he finally spoke, it didn't just shut down his teacher's anger. It shut down the entire room. And when he reached into his backpack and pulled out something wrapped in velvet, something that glimmered in the morning light, everything changed. That velvet case held a truth that silenced every whisper, every side eye, every question that had been swirling. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. You see, this story isn't just about Jason. It's about his father, Staff Sergeant Daniel Miller, a name very few people knew in town, and even fewer understood. It's about the burden that military families carry, long after the ceremonies are over, long after the medals are awarded, long after the flags are folded and handed to a trembling child. And it's about the gap between what we see and what we know. Because while some people in that classroom saw defiance, what they were really looking at was grief. Real grief. The kind that doesn't ask for permission to exist. There's a reason this video is blowing up across the country right now. People aren't just watching, they're feeling it. Comment sections are flooded with reactions, tears, apologies, memories, respect. And the crazy part? None of it would have happened if Jason hadn't made that quiet decision to stay seated. That one moment, that small refusal, sparked a conversation that this town, and maybe even this country, desperately needed to have. And that's why you can't click away now. Because if you do, you're going to miss the moment where everything flips. The moment where a kid, standing in front of his classmates, shows them a medal that most of them have only ever seen in textbooks. The Medal of Honor. Not some school prize or sports trophy. The real thing. The kind handed to families when a hero doesn't come home. You're still here, which means you feel what I'm saying. You're leaning in, wondering what came next, who said what, and how the rest of the day unfolded. Good. That means you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Because what happens next is going to turn everything upside down. You'll meet the principal who tried to suspend Jason. You'll meet the janitor who changed the school's flag after hours. You'll hear what Jason said in front of the entire student body during an emergency assembly called the very next day. And most importantly, you'll learn the story of a father who gave his life not for a country, but for his son's future. And once you understand that, you'll never look at a silent student the same way again.
So stay with me.
We're about to peel back the layers. This isn't just a video. It's a reminder. A reminder of what respect really means, where courage actually comes from, and why the quietest moments can speak the loudest truths. And just when you think you've got it all figured out, I promise you, Jason will do something that takes your breath away. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. But it's unforgettable. And that moment, it's coming next. The silence that followed Jason's simple, unwavering choice not to stand was heavier than most people realized. Sure, the classroom got quiet. But it wasn't the kind of silence that comes from confusion. It was the kind that simmers just before judgment boils over. His teacher, Mrs. Collins, was known for being sharp, proud, and fiercely patriotic. She'd been teaching American history for 20 years, and the flag meant something sacred to her. She was the kind of woman who ironed her classroom's flag every morning, who opened each class with a quote from a founding father, who made her students write essays every Veterans Day, even if the rest of the school barely acknowledged it. She wasn't cruel, but she had little patience for what she called symbolic disrespect, and when Jason didn't rise with the rest of the students, her expression changed in a way that didn't need words. And yet, what no one knew, not even Mrs. Collins, was that Jason wasn't making some political stand, and he wasn't being disrespectful. In fact, he was doing the opposite. But that part of the story wasn't ready to come out just yet. In the days leading up to the incident, Jason had been quieter than usual. And that was saying something. He wasn't the kind of student who joined cliques or talked just to be heard. He kept his head down, turned in his assignments on time, and sat in the back of most rooms unless he was assigned a seat. The kind of kid teachers barely noticed, and classmates didn't quite understand. But over the past week, something had changed. He started showing up to school earlier than normal, sometimes just sitting on the edge of the football bleachers before first period, staring off into the distance like he was waiting for something that never came. People saw him walking through the school hallways with his headphones in, but no music playing. A few students tried to talk to him. Lena from English class, Trevor from his science lab group, but Jason gave them small, polite nods and kept moving. Some kids whispered that maybe he was just a loner. Others, more cynically, wondered if he was planning something. In a world where schools have lived through too many tragedies, it's sad how quickly people jump to the worst assumptions when someone doesn't fit the mold. But Jason wasn't a threat. He was a thread. A thread to a story that no one had asked to unravel. And while everyone thought they understood what was happening in that classroom on Monday morning, none of them had the whole picture. Not the students who snickered. Not the teacher who demanded an explanation. And certainly not the assistant principal who came rushing down the hall after hearing about the incident from another staff member within minutes. They all thought they knew what kind of boy Jason was. But no one had stopped to wonder why he had suddenly changed in the first place. Why, after 2 years of blending in, he had started pulling away from the people who cared about him the most, including his best friend, Aiden. Now, Aiden was someone people knew. Star quarterback, class vice president, the kind of guy who could walk into a room and everyone knew his name. And yet, in the week before Jason refused to stand, even Aiden had been kept at a distance. Rumors swirled that the two had fought. Some claimed Aiden had called Jason unpatriotic. Others said Jason was mad about something that happened at a recent football game. But no one had the facts. Only Jason did, and he wasn't talking. And there was something else, too. Something small, almost easy to miss, but not if you were paying attention. Jason had been carrying an old black and white photo in his binder lately. The edges were frayed, like it had been folded too many times, and the corners curled just slightly. It showed a man in full military gear, a desert backdrop behind him, one arm slung casually around another soldier's shoulder. Students only got glimpses of it when he opened his folder, but it was enough to spark curiosity. Who was the man? Was he Jason's dad? A cousin? A friend? Nobody asked, and Jason didn't offer anything. But that photo, along with the velvet box in his backpack, was a clue that the people around him were missing. Then there were the red herrings. Little details that clouded the truth, even as they hinted at something more. Like the fact that Jason had been called into the counselor's office just 3 days before the incident. Mrs. Petrov, the school counselor, didn't usually involve herself unless there was a disciplinary issue or a personal crisis. But when asked about the meeting, she only said it was a routine check-in and refused to elaborate. That alone was strange, because nothing about Jason's behavior had triggered any sort of formal concern. Unless, of course, someone knew something they weren't saying. And then there was the rumor that Jason's father, if that's who the man in the photo was, had died overseas in a classified operation. But again, no one knew for sure. The only thing they did know was that Jason's mom never came to parent-teacher conferences, and he lived with his uncle, a former Marine who barely spoke and drove a truck with a Semper Fi sticker faded by years of weather.
Still, people talked.
That's what small towns do. One substitute teacher claimed she saw Jason get angry at a student who joked about soldiers, just signing up for college money. Another said he once caught Jason staring at the American flag during lunch, unmoving, like he was lost in thought. And yet, the same kid didn't bother to join the school's Veterans Day event the year before. So what was the truth? Was Jason hiding anger beneath his silence? Was he honoring someone the only way he knew how? Or was he carrying a guilt that no one else could understand? As the day wore on after the classroom incident, the whispers turned into conversations, and conversations turned into debates. Parents started calling the school. Some were outraged that a student could disrespect the flag without consequence. Others wanted to know what Jason's story really was. The local school board even considered issuing a statement, but the principal held off. Something in his gut told him there was more here than a knee-jerk reaction could fix. And he was right. Because that night, after school let out, Jason stayed behind. Alone in the auditorium, standing on the stage in the dark, he practiced a speech. A speech no one had asked him to give. A speech that, if heard, would make everything clearer. He wasn't just a kid trying to make a point. He was a son trying to carry a legacy. And tomorrow, he planned to share the truth. But not everyone wanted that truth to come out. Because in the shadows of this story, there were people with their own agendas, some who had buried secrets long ago, and others who feared what would happen if Jason opened that velvet box in front of a crowd. So the question remains, what is he really about to reveal? And why is everyone, from students to staff, so nervous about what comes next? The next morning arrived under a thick gray sky, the kind that made everything feel heavier than it was. The flag outside the school waved weakly in the cold wind, and inside the building, a quiet buzz had already taken over the halls. Word of Jason's refusal to stand had spread far beyond room 217. It was now the top subject at every lunch table, in staff lounges, even in the principal's office. Some students were supportive, others were skeptical, and a few were outright hostile. But nobody was indifferent anymore. And Jason knew, by the way people glanced at him, by the subtle shifts in their tone, that things were no longer simple. That velvet box in his backpack suddenly felt like a weight he hadn't prepared for. He had planned to reveal it, maybe during homeroom, maybe after class in front of his teacher, or maybe even during Friday's school assembly. But something had changed overnight. The air felt different. And the closer he got to the truth, the more it felt like someone was trying to stop him from sharing it. It began with something small. Jason opened his locker just after first period to grab the folder where he had placed the letter, an old, weathered envelope from his dad, handwritten on military stationery and meant to be read, if something happened. That letter was everything. It explained why Jason had stayed seated. It told the story of what his father believed about true patriotism. It was the proof Jason needed to explain himself in his father's words, not his own. But when he reached into the back of his locker, the folder was gone. At first, he thought maybe he had moved it, misplaced it by accident. But Jason was the kind of kid who kept things in their place, especially something that important. He emptied the locker completely. Nothing. Just a few books, a lunch bag, and the faint smell of old paper.
Panic started to build in his chest.
Not because the letter was just paper, but because someone else had it now. Someone who wasn't supposed to. He told the front office staff. They were polite, distracted, said they'd look into it, and offered to send a custodian to check lost and found. But Jason knew that folder hadn't just slipped out of place.
It had been taken.
And not by accident. The timing was too sharp, too exact. Someone knew he was about to speak up. Someone didn't want that to happen. And if that wasn't enough, during third period, a note appeared on his desk. No name. No handwriting he recognized. Just 4 words scribbled on lined paper. Let it go, Jason. That was the moment he realized this was bigger than just a school disagreement. This was a warning. As the day dragged on, another crack formed in the story. Aiden, his former best friend, pulled him aside near the stairwell between periods. He looked nervous, like he was debating whether to speak at all. Listen, man, he started, voice low, eyes darting toward the hallway. I didn't want to say anything before, but someone's been asking around about you. Not students. Adults. I think someone from the board. Maybe even a vet from the local legion. They don't want this getting messy. Jason stared at him, heart pounding. Aiden had never been the kind to get involved in drama. If he was coming forward now, it meant something was really wrong. But before Jason could press for more details, the bell rang, and Aiden disappeared into the sea of students. Jason was left standing there, uncertain whether Aiden had just warned him, or tried to scare him into backing down. That afternoon, Jason went to the library to use the school's computer and pull up a scanned copy of the letter he had uploaded weeks ago, just in case. It was gone. Deleted. Even from his cloud folder. That was the final straw. Someone had gone out of their way to erase the one piece of evidence that could have cleared everything up. And it wasn't just some careless tech glitch. It was intentional. That's when Jason decided to do something bold. He snuck into the old records room behind the guidance office, a place most students didn't even know existed. It was dusty, cramped, and filled with outdated files no one had touched in years. But Jason was looking for something very specific, an old school photo from 2012. One his uncle had told him about. It was the year Jason's dad had visited the school during Veterans Week, just before his final deployment. If Jason could find the photo, he could prove that his dad had been there, that he'd spoken about what service really meant. It would connect everything. But as Jason rifled through the binders, flipping through pages, he finally found the section marked Veterans Assembly, 2012. The sleeve where the photo should have been was empty. He stood frozen. That photo had always been there. His uncle remembered it. Even Mrs. Petrov had mentioned seeing it years ago. And now it was missing, too. Every road to the truth seemed to be disappearing right in front of him. But then, from the shadows of the doorway, a voice spoke. "You're digging where you shouldn't, son." Jason spun around. It was Mr. Halford, the school janitor. Quiet, older, always seemed invisible when cleaning the halls. But now he looked different. Not angry, just serious. Calm in a way that was unsettling. "There are things in this town that don't need to be reopened," Halford continued. "And people who don't appreciate being exposed." Jason stared at him, trying to figure out whether he was being threatened or warned. But then Halford's eyes softened. "Your father was a good man. Too good for what happened." And with that, he walked away, leaving Jason with more questions than answers. What did he mean by what happened? Why did everyone act like his father's legacy was something dangerous to talk about? And how deep did this cover-up really go? Jason had only wanted to explain a simple act of silence. But now he was caught in a web of missing files, erased memories, and whispered threats. And just when he thought things couldn't get more complicated, he opened his email that evening and found a message from an anonymous sender. No subject. No signature. Just a grainy photograph of his dad in uniform, standing next to someone Jason had never seen before. Someone wearing a school district badge. Jason stared at the grainy photograph on his screen, his heart pounding so loudly it felt like it echoed through the room. The image wasn't just unsettling because it was unexpected. It was unsettling because it told a story he'd never heard before. There was his dad, unmistakably young and in uniform, standing stiffly beside a man with graying hair, a school district badge clipped to his shirt, and a faint but strange smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Jason zoomed in, trying to find a name tag or something that might give away the identity, but the image was old, blurred, and clearly taken with discretion. It felt deliberate. Like someone had wanted Jason to see the photo, but only just enough to start asking questions without getting too close to the answer. And that's when it hit him. Whoever sent it didn't want him to stop. They wanted him to dig deeper. Or maybe they wanted to watch what happened when he did. He was still staring at the photo when his mom walked into the room. Jason quickly closed the laptop, but she noticed something was off. Her eyes narrowed in that way only moms do when they know their kid is hiding something important. "Jason, what's going on?" she asked softly, setting down the basket of laundry and walking toward him. At first, he didn't know how to explain it, but eventually he showed her the picture. She froze, her face draining of color. "Where did you get this?" she whispered, holding the edge of the desk to steady herself. Jason told her about the email. Her hands trembled slightly as she brought the screen closer to her face. And then she said something that sent chills straight down his spine. "That man, he was on the board when your father came back. He was involved with the disciplinary review after your dad filed that complaint." Jason blinked. What complaint? But she didn't answer. She just stood there, silent, as though she had said more than she meant to. And suddenly, everything shifted. For years, Jason had believed his father's military career had ended quietly, honorably. The Medal of Honor had been awarded posthumously, and the ceremony had been respectful, solemn, even. But now, a shadow was being cast over that narrative. What disciplinary review? What complaint? What had happened in the final months before his dad's last deployment that no one had ever mentioned? Before Jason could press her further, her phone buzzed. She picked it up and froze again. Her face went pale. Without saying a word, she handed him the screen. It was a message from an unknown number. A photo of the same grainy image. Underneath it, just 5 words. "Don't forget who's watching." Jason felt his stomach twist into a knot. It wasn't just him anymore. His mom was being dragged into this now, and it felt like someone was tightening a net around them both. The picture wasn't just a clue. It was a threat. The next day at school, things got worse. Jason tried to keep his head down, avoid attention, but he could feel the weight of eyes on him everywhere he went. The hallways that once felt routine now felt like a trap. Then, during lunch, his friend Mariah, who had always backed him quietly from the sidelines, came rushing up to him, out of breath, her face etched with panic. "Jason," she whispered urgently, pulling him into the empty music room. "I got something weird last night. An email. From your dad." Jason blinked. "What are you talking about?" She pulled out her phone and opened her inbox. There it was. An email sent from an account with his father's name, but the address was off. It had extra characters, odd formatting, and a date attached that didn't make sense. November 3rd, 2012, the day before Jason's dad died overseas. The subject line simply read, "You weren't supposed to know." Inside the email, a single line of text, "The truth didn't die with me." Attached was an audio file, but when they tried to play it, it was corrupted, just static and strange clicking sounds, almost like Morse code. Jason's hands were shaking now. Someone was trying to reach him, or someone was trying to confuse him. Either way, it was clear. This wasn't just about school anymore. It wasn't just about a boy sitting down in a classroom. This was about the past, and someone was working hard to either reveal it or bury it completely. Later that afternoon, Jason and Mariah snuck into the tech lab to analyze the audio file. With the help of a curious junior named Theo, who was known for his skills in hacking and encryption, they discovered something even stranger. The clicks in the audio weren't random. They were encoded data. And after running it through a decoding program, they extracted a partial message embedded in the sound. Just 3 words, Report 189, redacted. No further context. No explanation. But Theo recognized the format. This is a government document title, he whispered. Something classified. Something they didn't want released. Jason's mind was spinning. Why would someone go to these lengths? Who had access to his dad's files? And why now? But before they could dig deeper, Theo's computer shut down abruptly. Power cut from the wall. The lab lights flickered. The hallway outside went dark. And then a voice came over the intercom system. Not the principal's voice. Not a teacher's. Just static at first, then a deep male voice, distorted beyond recognition. You've gone too far. Go home. Walk away. Everyone froze. It lasted only 6 seconds. Then the school power came back on, and everything resumed as if nothing had happened. The front office claimed it was a system glitch. Jason knew better. Someone was watching them. Someone was controlling more than just emails and files now. They had reach inside the school. Inside his home. Inside his father's past. And just as Jason began putting the pieces together, something even more jarring happened that night. A package arrived at their front porch with no return address. Inside was a military dog tag. It wasn't his dad's. It belonged to someone else. Someone named M. Reyes. Along with it, a blood-stained scrap of paper that read, "Ask your mother what really happened in Fallujah." Jason turned to look at his mom, who had gone pale again, tears forming in her eyes. But this time, she didn't say a word. Jason couldn't sleep that night. Every creak in the house, every gust of wind against the window sent adrenaline coursing through his veins. His mom had gone silent again, retreated into herself like she had when his dad first passed. She didn't explain the dog tag, didn't acknowledge the bloodstained note, and when Jason had pressed her with questions about Fallujah, she'd simply walked out of the room and locked her bedroom door. That silence wasn't just strange.
It was terrifying.
And as the darkness settled over the neighborhood, Jason stared out the window, heart pounding, convinced, no, certain, that someone was watching the house. The same black SUV had driven slowly past the front of their home twice already in the last hour. It didn't stop, didn't even speed up, just coasted like it was on patrol, like it had done this before and would do it again. He felt like a target, like the walls of his home were made of glass and everyone else had the playbook but him. At school the next morning, everything felt off. Mariah didn't show up. She hadn't answered texts, DMs, or calls. Jason asked around, but no one had seen her. Not in the halls. Not in homeroom. Not online. She was just gone. It was only when he approached her locker and found it already cleared out. No books, no notes, not even the sticker she'd stuck inside the door at the beginning of the year, that he knew something was wrong. That's when the first wave of true fear hit him, not just confusion or frustration, but actual, paralyzing fear. Because he realized, maybe this wasn't just about unraveling a mystery. Maybe this was about survival. And maybe Mariah had already gotten too close to something someone didn't want exposed. The teachers brushed it off when he asked. She probably just moved, they said. Or got sick. These things happen. But Jason had known her since 3rd grade. Mariah didn't just disappear. She fought for truth like it was oxygen. She wouldn't back down unless she'd been forced to. The day got worse. When he returned to his locker, the lock had been cut. At first glance, nothing seemed stolen. But tucked inside, right where he normally kept his notebook, was an unmarked envelope. No stamp, no handwriting, just thick paper, sealed and slightly damp. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside, a single Polaroid photo. It showed him sitting at lunch with Mariah 2 days ago. The angle, low and to the side, was clearly taken without their knowledge. In the corner of the picture, someone had drawn an X over Mariah's face with red marker. No words. No explanation. Just the picture, like a warning. Jason's legs nearly buckled beneath him. His hands were shaking so badly he had to lean against the locker door just to stay upright. That was the moment he realized it wasn't paranoia. It was real. Someone was documenting him, following him, and now they were signaling that the people closest to him were in danger too. That night, things took a darker turn still. When he got home, the front door was unlocked. His mother wasn't in the kitchen, wasn't in the living room. Her phone sat on the counter, still plugged in. Her car was in the driveway. But the house was completely silent. Jason's breath quickened as he called out for her. No answer. He sprinted through every room, checked the backyard, the basement, even the attic. Nothing. Then he saw it. On the dining table, where the photo of his dad had once stood in a small silver frame, there was now a flash drive. The photo was gone. Just the flash drive, with a sticky note attached that read, "This is your only chance to back off." Jason didn't plug it in immediately. He knew enough now to be cautious. But that didn't matter. His phone lit up with a notification, a video file sent from an anonymous number. He opened it without thinking. It was surveillance footage. Grainy, black and white, time-stamped from that afternoon. It showed his mother getting into a van with tinted windows, a man in a tactical jacket behind her. She wasn't struggling. But she wasn't smiling either. She looked defeated, tired, like someone who had stopped fighting. The video ended with the van pulling away, disappearing into the distance. Jason's heart broke wide open. They had taken her. Whoever they were. They weren't playing anymore. Jason couldn't breathe.
Couldn't think.
He fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. His mother had kept secrets to protect him, and now she was gone. Mariah had disappeared after trying to help. And now he was alone, with no one left to trust. He began to spiral. Was his dad even the hero they claimed he was? Or had the Medal of Honor been used to cover something up, something bigger than honor, something shameful and buried? The contradictions were piling up. The threats, the clues, the vanishing allies, it all pointed to a deeper conspiracy, one that had swallowed his father and now seemed determined to erase everything connected to him. But the question that kept haunting Jason more than anything else, the one that echoed in the hollow silence of his darkened house as the wind howled outside, was simple. Why him? Why now? Why had it taken nearly a decade for someone to start pulling the strings again? And why did it all lead back to Fallujah, to a name on a bloodstained dog tag, and to a past no one wanted to talk about? Jason sat in the dark with a flash drive in one hand and his mother's phone in the other, staring at the last message she'd ever received, one that had been deleted and then recovered by accident. A single text from an unsaved number that read, "You raised him well. Too well." Jason didn't sleep that night, not because he was afraid anymore, but because everything he thought he knew had begun to collapse under the weight of one disturbing realization. He couldn't explain it, but something had been nagging at him, something he had dismissed as coincidence. It wasn't the bloodstained dog tag. It wasn't the vanishing of Mariah or the mysterious disappearance of his mother. It was that final message. You raised him well. Too well. And the way it was phrased. Not you raised him alone. Not you tried to protect him. No, it was the implication that whoever had sent that message knew both of his parents. Knew them personally. Knew what they had done and, more importantly, what they were still part of. That single sentence twisted in his mind until it cracked open a truth he had buried for years. His father hadn't died in Fallujah. Not really. The casket was closed. The body was unrecoverable. The medals, the ceremony, it had all been based on a narrative Jason had never questioned.
But now?
Now he had to. The flash drive sat untouched on his desk, but the next clue didn't come from it. It came from an old neighbor, a quiet man named Curtis who lived 3 houses down and used to fix up motorcycles in his garage. Jason hadn't seen him in months. Most thought he'd moved away. But that morning, as Jason stood outside waiting for the police, who never showed up, Curtis approached him slowly, cautiously, like someone approaching a wounded animal. Without saying a word, he handed Jason a folded-up note and said, "Your dad wasn't the hero they told you he was, son. But he wasn't the villain either." And then, just like that, Curtis turned and walked away, disappearing down the sidewalk as if nothing had happened. Jason opened the note with shaking hands. Inside was a hand-drawn map of a military compound, somewhere remote, labeled only with grid coordinates and a single chilling phrase, Project Revenant active. The word sent a chill through his spine. Revenant. He'd heard it once before. In the video logs his father recorded, briefly, buried in the background static, a word he thought was just garbled audio. But now, paired with this map and the context of everything unraveling around him, Jason knew it wasn't just a word.
It was a code name.
A program. Something his father had been part of and possibly never left. The pieces started falling into place, but not in a way that brought clarity. Instead, everything grew darker. Curtis's house, the one with the motorcycles, caught fire that night. Fire trucks showed up, but it was too late. The whole structure collapsed and no one found Curtis. The official story claimed faulty wiring. Jason didn't believe that for a second. That house had been fine for decades. Someone had silenced him. Just like Mariah. Just like his mom. But the twist, the real twist, came when Jason finally plugged in the flash drive. The screen flickered, then loaded a video file. And what he saw nearly made him fall out of his chair. The video showed a younger version of his father, alive, well, and seated at a table across from a man in civilian clothes with a U.S. intelligence badge clipped to his collar. Revenant protocol is in effect, the man said. Once you're declared dead, there's no going back. You understand that, right? Jason's dad didn't hesitate. It's the only way to protect them. No one can ever know what we did in that desert. Not even my wife. Not my son. The video ended there, but it left Jason gasping. His father was alive when the government said he wasn't. And worse, he had volunteered for it. Every memory Jason had of him, the way he'd always seemed distant, how he avoided questions about the war, even before he supposedly died, it all started to make sense. His dad had staged his own death, with the help of the government, as part of something bigger, something secret, dangerous, and buried beneath layers of patriotic ceremony and silence. But then why the threats now? Why the surveillance? Why had they come back? That answer came in a second file, an audio log. It was newer, dated just 2 weeks ago. Jason hit play. His father's voice, older, wearier, crackled through the speaker. If you're hearing this, it means they've turned on me. I broke protocol. I came back. I had to see you one last time. I've made mistakes, Jason. But you were never supposed to pay for them. If they find this drive, they'll erase us both. Don't trust anyone. Not even the people wearing flags on their sleeves. Jason dropped the flash drive. His mind raced. The government hadn't just faked his dad's death. They had used him. Weaponized him. And now, they were cleaning up the mess, one person at a time. Mariah, his mom, Curtis, they were all collateral. And suddenly, Jason wasn't just some high school kid who didn't stand for the pledge. He was the last loose thread in a cover-up that stretched across a decade. And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife even deeper, Jason received a new text. Unknown number. No words. Just a single image. A blurry, grainy photo of someone walking through a military hangar, handcuffed and flanked by 2 guards. The face was unmistakable. Mariah.
Alive.
In custody. And behind her, just barely in frame, a shadowed figure with the same jawline, the same stance Jason had seen in old family videos. His father. Still alive. Still involved. But whose side was he on now? Jason stared at the image on his phone for what felt like hours, the world around him dissolving into a blur of colorless static. It wasn't just that Mariah was alive. It was the expression on her face that haunted him. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper, more personal. A look that said she knew what was coming and had accepted it long before he even realized it existed. That image, that one split-second freeze frame, ripped through every illusion Jason had left. She had lied to him, or, at the very least, kept things from him.
But why?
And worse, what else had she kept hidden? The coordinates on the map kept pulling at him like gravity, but Jason knew he couldn't go charging into whatever Project Revenant was without knowing who he could trust. And that's when he made the hardest decision yet. He drove across town to see the one person he hadn't spoken to in weeks, his Uncle Thomas. A retired intelligence officer, Thomas had always been the quiet, guarded type, more comfortable with classified documents than backyard barbecues. Jason remembered the look on his uncle's face at the funeral years ago, how he didn't cry, didn't flinch, just stared at the flag-draped coffin like it wasn't real. Back then, it struck him as odd. Now it felt like confirmation. When Jason showed him the photo of Mariah and the video files from the flash drive, Thomas didn't speak. He poured a drink, sat down heavily, and stared out the window as if the past was coming back to collect its debts. Finally, he said, "You think you're chasing your father's memory. But what you're really chasing, Jason, is a ghost that never wanted to be found." Jason pressed harder, demanded answers, even threatened to go public. That's when Thomas turned to him, his voice low and final. "You can either walk away now and keep your life, or you keep digging and risk ending up like the others. This isn't just about your dad. It never was." The ultimatum hung in the air like a loaded gun. Jason felt it deep in his chest. This was the crossroads. If he chose truth, he was stepping into a war he didn't understand, against enemies who didn't wear uniforms and didn't follow rules. But if he chose safety, if he walked away, he'd never look at himself the same way again. He'd be haunted by the faces of the people who vanished trying to protect him. He'd never know who his father really was. And most of all, he'd lose whatever remained of Mariah, his only connection to that life before everything exploded. Jason left without another word, his heart pounding with equal parts rage and terror. The air felt heavier now, as if eyes were on him everywhere. At the grocery store, at traffic lights, in the parking lot outside his school. The feeling of being followed was no longer just paranoia. It was real. He knew it was only a matter of time before they made their next move. And they didn't disappoint. That night, a manila envelope was slipped under his door. Inside was a single-burner phone and a handwritten note. "You have 24 hours. Deliver the flash drive to the coordinates.
Come alone.
If you don't, she dies." Jason's hands trembled as he read the note again and again, trying to make sense of what they wanted. It wasn't just data. They had that already. This was personal. This was leverage. They knew his every move, every connection. They knew that if they held Mariah, he would come. But what shook him the most wasn't the threat, it was the implication. If Mariah was alive and being used against him, then she wasn't just a victim. She might have been part of it all along. Planted, groomed, assigned. And suddenly, every conversation, every secret they shared, felt like bait on a hook. That night, Jason didn't sleep. He sat by the window, clutching the flash drive and the burner phone, going back and forth between two impossible choices. Turn it in and risk exposing everything his father sacrificed to hide. Or run, and live the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, never knowing if Mariah lived or died. The line between right and wrong had evaporated. Now there was only survival.
And truth.
But they were on opposite ends of the same road, and Jason couldn't follow both. Just before dawn, his phone buzzed. One final message. No sender. No timestamp. Just a blurry still from a surveillance camera. It showed Jason, standing at his father's grave. Not from yesterday or even last week, but from 2 years ago. Long before he knew anything. The implication hit like a freight train. They had been watching him all along. Even before he knew there was a story to uncover. And someone, maybe even someone close to him, had helped them do it. Jason's pulse pounded as he approached the coordinates from the map, a desolate military installation cloaked in shadows and silence. The air was thick with tension, each step echoing like a drumbeat of impending doom. He clutched the flash drive tightly, the ultimatum replaying in his mind. Deliver it alone, or Mariah dies. The facility loomed ahead, its gates ajar, as if inviting him into the heart of the conspiracy. Inside, the corridors were eerily silent, lit by flickering fluorescent lights that cast long, distorted shadows. Jason's senses were heightened, every creak and whisper amplifying his anxiety. He navigated the labyrinthine hallways, guided only by instinct and the haunting memories of his father's voice. Suddenly, A door creaked open, revealing a control room filled with monitors displaying surveillance footage of him. Every move he'd made, every conversation, meticulously recorded. The realization hit him like a tidal wave. He'd been a pawn in a game far more intricate than he could have imagined. A voice crackled over the intercom, cold and devoid of emotion. "Welcome, Jason. We've been expecting you." The room's lights dimmed, and a figure emerged from the shadows, his father. Alive but changed. The man who once read him bedtime stories now stood as a symbol of betrayal. "You were never supposed to find this place," his father said, his eyes devoid of the warmth Jason remembered. "But now that you're here, choices must be made." Jason's heart ached, torn between the desire for answers and the sting of deception. "Why?" he demanded. "Why fake your death? Why involve me in this nightmare?" Writer and hashtag 039 S Digest. +2. Medium. +2. Medium. +2. His father sighed, a sound heavy with regret. "It was to protect you. But things changed. The project evolved, and now you're the key to its future." Before Jason could respond, the monitors flickered, displaying Mariah, restrained and unconscious. A timer counted down ominously beside her image. "Make your choice, Jason," the voice over the intercom intoned. "Join us and ensure her safety, or walk away and face the consequences." The weight of the decision pressed down on him, the lines between right and wrong blurring. Trust shattered, alliances questioned, and the true scale of the conspiracy laid bare. Jason stood at a crossroads, the fate of those he loved hanging in the balance. The clock ticked down, each second a reminder of the perilous path ahead. Jason's breath caught as he stepped into the dimly lit chamber, the air thick with tension and the scent of oil and ozone. The walls were lined with screens displaying surveillance footage, each one a window into his life. Moments he thought were private now laid bare. At the center stood his father, eyes shadowed, expression unreadable. "Welcome, Jason," his father's voice echoed. "You've come far."
Why?
Jason demanded, his voice trembling. "Why fake your death? Why drag me into this?" His father sighed, a sound heavy with years of secrets. "It was to protect you. But things changed. The project evolved, and now you're the key to its future." Before Jason could respond, the monitors flickered, displaying Mariah, restrained and unconscious. A timer counted down ominously beside her image. "Make your choice, Jason," the voice over the intercom intoned. "Join us and ensure her safety, or walk away and face the consequences." Jason's heart pounded, torn between the desire for answers and the sting of betrayal. He glanced at the flash drive in his hand, the weight of its contents pressing down on him. He had to act. With a surge of determination, Jason lunged forward, slamming the flash drive into the console. The screens erupted in static, alarms blaring as the system began to unravel. His father's eyes widened in shock. "What have you done?" "Ending this," Jason replied, his voice steady. Suddenly, the chamber shook, lights flickering as the facility's systems collapsed. Jason raced to Mariah's side, freeing her from her restraints. She stirred, eyes fluttering open. "Jason." "I'm here," he said, helping her to her feet. "We need to get out." As they made their way through the crumbling facility, Jason's mind raced. The truth was out, but at what cost? His father's betrayal, the lies, the manipulation, it all weighed heavily on him. But he had chosen the truth, and now there was no turning back. Emerging into the night, the facility behind them engulfed in flames, Jason and Mariah stood together, the cool air a stark contrast to the chaos they'd left behind. They had survived, but the scars would remain. The world would never be the same, but perhaps, just perhaps, they could find a new path forward. The sun had barely risen over the charred remains of the facility, casting long shadows across the debris-strewn landscape. Jason stood amidst the wreckage, the weight of recent revelations pressing heavily upon him. The air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke and the haunting silence of aftermath. Beside him, Mariah stirred, her eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and lingering fear. In the days that followed, the world seemed to move on, oblivious to the events that had transpired beneath its surface. News outlets reported the incident as a minor fire at an abandoned facility, with no mention of the clandestine operations or the lives entangled within. Jason, however, couldn't shake the feeling that this was merely the end of one chapter in a much larger narrative. As he delved deeper into the contents of the flash drive, Jason uncovered layers of information that painted a broader picture of the conspiracy. Names, dates, and operations spanning decades hinted at a network far more extensive than he had imagined. Among the files, a series of encrypted messages stood out, their origins traced to locations across the globe. Deciphering them revealed coordinated efforts, suggesting that the events he had experienced were part of a larger, ongoing operation. One message, in particular, caught his attention. It referenced a Phase 2 set to commence in the coming months. The details were sparse, but the implications were clear. The conspiracy was far from over. Jason realized that his journey had only just begun, and the choices he made moving forward would determine not only his fate but potentially the fate of countless others. Determined to prevent further harm, Jason reached out to trusted contacts, sharing the information he had gathered. Together, they began to piece together the puzzle, identifying key players and potential threats. As they worked, Jason couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose, a drive to see justice served and to ensure that the sacrifices made were not in vain. Yet, amidst the progress, a lingering question remained. Who could he truly trust? The betrayal he had experienced had left deep scars, and the realization that the conspiracy extended beyond what he had uncovered meant that danger still lurked in the shadows. As he prepared for the battles ahead, Jason knew that vigilance and resilience would be his greatest allies. In the quiet moments, when the weight of the world threatened to overwhelm him, Jason found solace in the knowledge that he had taken a stand. He had faced the darkness and emerged with a renewed sense of purpose. And though the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, he was ready to confront whatever challenges lay in wait, driven by the hope of a brighter future and the unwavering belief that truth would ultimately prevail.